During my sermon a little bit later this morning, I'll be talking about humorist and author David Sedaris, who it turns out is a jazz fan, and a few years ago he published a list of his 10 favorite jazz songs. So today we'll be listening to several pieces from that list, and to play that music we have a couple of special guests this morning, Patrick Reiner on saxophone and Ava Lentz on bass, along with Sunnyhill regulars John Pollock on drums and Buddy Rigger on piano. Please join me in welcoming them. And our own Doug.
Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the South Hills, also known as Sunnyhill. Our mission here is to create a more just and compassionate community within and beyond our walls. My name is Rebecca Senaway, and I serve as a worship associate for this congregation. If you are a newcomer, please visit our welcome table in the fellowship hall, where you can find out more information about our congregation, and you can sign up to receive The Beat, which is our weekly email newsletter. And if you'd like to be greeted as a newcomer after the service, please take a red mug, and our members will seek you out and warmly welcome you. As a gentle reminder, please silence your electronic devices now. If you have a restless infant or toddler with you and you need a place to take a break outside of the sanctuary, we have an infant care room in the back corner that you can access from the hallway, and you can still hear and see the service. And now, a quick public service announcement about the auction. Sunnyhill's Under the Sea Service Auction, which is an event, our biggest social event of the year, our biggest fundraiser of the year, is coming up. It is March 28th. If you are donating a physical item, the auction team needs to know about it today. Physical donations are anything you can hold in your hand. Handmade items, sporting tickets, gift cards, certificates, theater seats, baskets, you get the idea. They need to know today. And as an example, Vanna, this beautiful stained glass piece was created and donated just for the auction by Randy Green. And if you come to this excellent party on March 28th and are the highest bidder, you can take it home. Randy not only created this, but he delivered it here, uploaded his donation to the website, and did it all before the deadline. Yay, Randy! So, if you're new or you have questions, the auction team will be in the fellowship hall today. You can email them, you can seek them out. There's more information on our website. Please do that. Please come to the party. It's a wonderful event. Our opening words this morning were written by Amy Mackenzie Quinn. Welcome to this common, sacred space. Common because we are all welcome. Sacred because here we transform the ordinary and attend to the profound. We carry with us our regrets, doubts, fears, stories, laughter. May they inspire our worship. Above all, may we each meet what we most need to find. On this day, in this common. Please join me in saying the words for lighting our chalice. As frozen earth holds the determined seed, this sacred space holds our weariness, our worry, our laughter, and our celebration. Let us bring seed and soul into the light of thought, the warmth of community, and the hope of love.
For our hymn today, our brass is going to play through the melody once before we all join in singing. But please rise and body your spirit, for there is a river flowing in my soul.
sit in front of the stairs today because we're a little bit crowded on the stage, but you can come sit next to me or right in front of me. How about that? Okay, so the story that I'm going to tell you is sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. The story that I'm telling you is about a little boy who was a prince, but he was very unhappy. And his father, the king, tried everything that he knew to try to make the prince happy, but he was just sad all of the time. Now, we're all sad sometimes, right? But this prince was sad almost constantly. And they brought in all kinds of experts to talk with him, doctors and philosophers, and they even got desperate enough to bring a minister in at one point. But nothing seemed to help this little prince feel happier. And so all of the advisors of the king, the royal court, got together and discussed the matter. And the only thing they could come up with was something that sounds a little bit strange to us. But one of them had heard long ago that if someone who is sad wears the coat of a happy person, then some of that happiness will rub off onto the sad person and make them happy. So the team decided to form a little subcommittee of folks that would go out into the world, look for a truly happy person, bring that person's coat back to the prince. The idea being that if he wore that coat, some of that happiness would rub off onto him. So it's, one of the things about these stories sometimes is that you wonder what these royal advisors were thinking, right? Because they don't always give the best advice, but sometimes it's the best that they can come up with at any given point. And so they went out. This team went out, they looked far and wide for a truly happy person, but they had a really hard time because it didn't seem like anyone was truly happy all the time. And a lot of people were just truly unhappy. And it seemed like people had either too much or too little of everything. Either they were too lonely or they had too many people crowding around them all the time. Either they didn't have enough to eat or they ate too much. Either they didn't have enough children or they had too many children. There was no one that seemed to be perfectly content and satisfied with just what they had. And the advisors had given up and they were walking back home when they heard someone in a field whistling this happy little melody. And they went over to this person and they saw it was a farmer who was pulling weeds through all these rows of his crops. And he seemed so happy, just pulling weeds and whistling away. And so they called out to him and they asked if they could speak with him. And they asked him if he was happy. And he said, I really am happy. I can't think of anything that I want or need that I don't already have. And they said, wouldn't you rather have a bigger farm than this? And he said, no, if it were bigger, I really wouldn't be able to take care of it. And they said, don't you wish you lived in the city and worked in a store instead of having to be out here in the field sweating every day? And he said, no, then I wouldn't be able to enjoy the beauty of nature and my hard work. He said, I'm really perfectly happy as I am. And the group of advisors said, that's great. We found our person. And they told him the nature of their quest. They said that they needed to bring his coat back to the prince in the hope that that coat might make him happy. And the farmer said to them, there's only one problem. I don't own a coat. All I have is my boots and my pants and the shirt on my back. And so it was that the advisors went back to the king and the prince empty-handed, but not empty-headed, because they had an idea that the prince needed to somehow learn to weave his own coat of happiness and perhaps find contentment with what he already had rather than looking for something else. And with that, we will sing you out to your art classes.
To members of Sunnyhill going through difficult events, whatever they may be, offering the loving presence that binds our community together. If you want to get in touch with us, you may contact us directly, call the church office or send an email to pastoralcare@sunnyhill.org. Each week, we share joys and sorrows submitted by members of the congregation. We share things we are celebrating as well as things we are mourning, so they need not be held alone. Joys and sorrows may be submitted online from our website or handwritten and submitted at the welcome table in Fellowship Hall. After each joy or sorrow that I read, please respond by saying, "We hold you in our hearts." This morning we have one sorrow. It is from Melissa Hill. Her sorrow is that on Thursday, February 27th, my friend Sue passed away after a long illness. Please keep her children, Jake and Ashley, in your thoughts. To Melissa and Jake and Ashley, we hold you in our hearts. Let us take a moment of silence to bear in mind this sorrow, as well as those held too closely to be shared. All we have carried through the seasons of our lives has brought us here to this place, made sacred by our coming together. May we hold all that we carry in the warm embrace of this loving community.
Please join me in the spirit of meditation and prayer. When times are hard and dusk fades into night, when challenges face us at every twist and turn, when we are surprised by apathy, hatred, and fear, when we have tripped and fallen in the disappearing light, when good people do bad things and bad things happen to good people, we look not just for refuge, but for something to hold on to, something that in the midst of uncertainty will not fade, something bigger than the smallness around us, something that will keep us afloat in dangerous waters. When faced with times such as these, certain images might help sustain us. The face of a loved one, the wagging tail of a pet, the golden light of a sunny afternoon, the smell of newly fallen rain, the season's comforting blanket of snow, the child's wonder-filled gaze. Let us share a moment of silence to consider the challenges we face and the images of the good that might sustain us. may we share with one another and with others the peace that is present at the eye of the storm, the warmth that produces both laughter and tears, and the container of our communal lives which holds all these things and all else now and always. Amen. Given the harsh and frustrating realities of our world right now, and my sometimes cynical response, I was greatly relieved recently when I read an article proclaiming that sarcasm is actually good for you. Even though my initial reaction might have been a somewhat sarcastic, yeah, right. But according to recent studies conducted by psychologists and organizational behavior researchers, sarcasm exercises the brain more than sincere statements do, since the brain has to work harder to understand and translate it. This extra processing, they say, may make us sharper because it activates abstract thinking. One study suggests that not only does sarcasm stimulate complex thinking, it also works to reduce the impact of the potentially negative effects of anger. In this particular study, a group of college students were asked to staff a call center at a cell phone company. Some of the complaints they received were simply angry, while others were more sarcastic than they were overtly angry. According to the study, the students were problems creatively when the complaints were sarcastic in nature as opposed to just plain angry. Also, sarcasm can be an indication of a healthy ability to show affection. There's an old adage that says we tend to tease the ones we love, as we are more likely to use sarcasm with people we care for. Parents may offer up a teasing remark to soften what otherwise may be seen as harsh criticism. For example, saying to your child who failed to make their bed, and I think I may have actually said these words one time, "I saw how neatly you made your bed this morning," rather than chastising them in a colder and more angry way, will send the same message but in a somewhat more loving way. So if you find yourself being frequently sarcastic these days, as I sometimes do, the good news is that your sarcasm may in fact be an emotionally healthy response to what's happening around you. But there is, of course, a fine line between a healthy level of sarcasm and an overabundance of it. Too much sarcasm can come across merely as hostility rather than playfulness. So it's good to temper sarcasm with some amount of tenderness. One of the great contemporary masters of sarcasm, cynicism, and, I think, tenderness is David Sedaris. Sedaris, a humorist, author, and radio personality, is perhaps best known for his NPR radio essays, beginning in 1992 with his Santaland Diaries, which hilariously described his experiences working as a Christmas elf at Macy's department store in New York City. For those of you not familiar with Sedaris' work, I'd like to share the following excerpts from the Santaland Diaries, which are, I think, still replayed each year on NPR. My costume is green. I wear green velvet knickers, a yellow turtleneck, a forest green velvet smock, and a perky stocking cap decorated with spangles. This is my work uniform. Today was the official opening day of Santaland, and I worked as a magic window elf, a Santa elf, and an usher elf. The magic window is located in the adult quick peep line. My job was to say, "Step on the magic star and look through the window, and you can see Santa." I was at the magic window for 15 minutes before a man approached me and said, "You look so freaking stupid." I have to admit, he had a point. But still, I wanted to say that at least I get paid to look stupid, that he gives it away for free. But I can't say things like that because I'm supposed to be married. So instead I said, "Thank you. Thank you." As if I had misunderstood and thought he said, "You look terrific. Thank you." He was a brawny, wise guy wearing a vinyl jacket and carrying a bag from Radio Shack. I should have said real loud, "Sorry, man, I don't date other guys." A child came to Santa this morning and his mother said, "All right, Jason, tell Santa what you want. Tell him what you want." Jason said, "I want Procter & Gamble to stop animal testing." The mother said, "Procter, Jason, that's Procter & Gamble. And what do they do to animals? Do they torture animals, Jason? Is that what they do?" Jason said, "Yes, they torture." He was probably 6 years old. We were packed today, absolutely packed, and everyone was cranky. People stand in line for 2 hours and they go over the edge. I was sent into the hallway to direct the second phase of the line. The hallway was packed with people, and all of them seemed to stop me with a question. Which way to the down escalator? Which way to the elevator? The patio restaurant? Gift wrap? The women's restroom? Trim a tree? There was a line for Santa and a line for the women's bathroom, and one woman, after asking me a dozen questions already, asked, "Which is the line for the women's bathroom?" I shouted that I thought it might be the line with all the women in it. She said, "I'm going to have you fired." I had 2 people say that to me today. "I'm going to have you fired." Go ahead. Be my guest. I'm wearing a green velvet costume. It doesn't get any worse than this. Who do these people think they are? I'm going to have you fired. And I wanted to lean over and say, "I'm going to have you killed." As you can tell from this passage, Sedaris makes a living by embracing his own sarcasm and his own vulnerability and personal foibles. What makes his sardonic wit palatable is the fact that he often uses it to reveal his own challenges and struggles. For example, in his most recent collection of essays titled Calypso, Sedaris includes this brief story about an experience he had boarding an airplane a few years ago. He writes, "A man across the aisle tried to open his overhead bin. It was stuck for some reason, and he pounded on it, saying to anyone who would listen, 'This is like Obamacare, broken.' Several of the passengers around me laughed, and I noted their faces, vowing that in the event of a crisis, I would not help lead them to an emergency exit. You people are on your own." Knowing that if anything bad did happen, it would likely be one of them who would save me. It would be just my luck. I had passed judgment, so fate would force me to eat my words. So what starts as a cynical moment of passing judgment on others turns into a moment of self-examination and self-critique. In this way, Sedaris sends a message that yes, sometimes people are obnoxious, frequently they are stupid, and occasionally completely intolerable. But I'm one of those people too, as are we all. In other words, he's using his wit not so much to divide, but to unite us all as flawed human beings, sharing a flawed human experience. And I believe there's a lesson in Sedaris' work about authenticity and humility that would be useful for all of us to learn. We are who we are, and there's no point in pretending otherwise. We are, by nature, cynical creatures who find other people difficult to be around. At the same time, we know that we all share many of the same flaws, and it is these flaws themselves that can sometimes be the source of empathy and compassion, both for ourselves and for others. David Sedaris writes with unflinching honesty and relentless humor about his family of origin, a wisecracking collection of 6 siblings and 2 eccentric, but in their own way, loving parents, one of whom his mother died some years ago. And he writes with the same unflinching honesty and relentless humor about himself, his struggles with, for example, quitting smoking and drinking, and his relationship with his longtime partner, Hugh. In many ways, through his writing, Sedaris gives each of us permission to look at our own families and our own lives through this lens of cynicism that is also tinted with tenderness and love. Sedaris writes about a visit he had with his father, now in his 90s, and living alone in the house where the family was raised. He writes, "What happened to your arm?" I asked my dad. "I fell," he told me, waving away my concern. "It happens sometimes when I turn around too quickly." "So you fall and then what?" "I crawl around for a while until I come to a chair or something, and then I lift myself up." Later, eating dinner at an airport restaurant with Hugh, I looked around at our fellow diners, all on their way to somewhere else, but all I could think about was my father crawling through his house in search of a chair he could use to hoist himself up. He'd said it so matter-of-factly. "What I do is crawl around for a while," as if I'd asked how he makes a sandwich. There are any number of people who have to live like that when they get to be terribly old, but for him it's a choice. My father could have a nice place. There could be help at the ready should he fall, a cook, a driver, someone to make the bed every morning. He's just too cheap to pay for it. The killer, I said to Hugh, is that he's saving the money to give to his kids, who will spend it wildly without even thinking. A person could live handsomely on the money we waste over the course of a given year, and here's our father wandering from room to room with a flashlight. He falls and gets banged up, then covers his bruises with cotton balls and masking tape because Band-Aids are too expensive. In this passage, Sedaris takes what might be seen as a painful situation and somehow manages to find a spark of humor in it. Manages to find, in the midst of dealing with his father's irrational obstinance, not just frustration and anger, but also recognition of the absurdity of the human condition, which is something that connects us to one another profoundly and meaningfully. It reminds me of an old joke about a guy who walks in to a psychiatrist's office and says, "Doctor, you've got to help me. My brother thinks that he is a chicken." And the doctor says, "Well, why don't you bring him into a psychiatric hospital and get him some kind of help?" And the guy says, "I would, but the thing is, I really need the eggs." Relationships and the absurdity of the human condition are crazy making. And yet we need each other deeply. And when we are able to be honest with ourselves and others about who we really are, and when we are able to bring some humor and tenderness to our situation, then we are better able to deal with the harsh realities and absurdities of life, whatever they may be. The gospel, or good news, of David Sedaris is that it's okay to be authentically who we are. That being human means being sometimes cynical. That sarcasm and healthy vulnerability often go hand in hand. And that in the end, all we really have are these frequently frustrating but ultimately necessary and life-giving relationships with each other and with ourselves. In these challenging times, I hope and pray that each of us might learn to balance cynicism with compassion, sorrow with humor, and despair with something resembling hope. May it be so. Amen.
Please rise. When the Spirit says do.
give and receive our morning offering to support the work of this congregation.
Please join me in saying the words for extinguishing our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
There is finally only one thing required of us. That is to take life whole, the sunlight and shadows together, to live the life that is given us with courage and humor and truth. We have such a little moment out of the vastness of time for all our wondering and loving. Therefore, let there be no half-heartedness. Rather, let the soul be ardent in its pain, in its yearning, in its praise. Then shall peace enfold our days, and glory shall not fade from our lives. Go in peace.
Like